I'm Hayley, 67 years old. And until recently, I thought the home Frank and I built 40 years ago would remain my sanctuary until my final days. My son Jacob was once my pride and joy before he married Amanda, a woman who seemed perfect on the surface. The day after their wedding, Amanda showed up at my doorstep with a notary thinking she'd finally take everything I owned. She had no idea I'd been documenting her schemes for months. Before I tell you how I outsmarted my greedy daughter-in-law, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when family tries to take advantage of you. Frank and I built our home when we were just newlyweds. It wasn't much at first. A modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house on a quiet street in a developing suburb of Portland. But over 42 years of marriage, we turned it into something special. Frank installed the hardwood floors himself. I designed the garden that blooms from early spring through late fall, and together we created the kind of home where neighbors would stop by just to sit on the porch and chat over iced tea. After Frank passed away from heart complications 5 years ago, I found comfort in these walls. Every corner held memories, from the height marks of Jacob growing up, penciled on the kitchen doorframe, to the small dent in the living room wall, where Frank accidentally bumped the Christmas tree in '93. This house wasn't just property, it was the physical embodiment of our life together. Financially, I was comfortable. Frank had been prudent with our savings, the mortgage was paid off years ago, and his life insurance policy, plus my Social Security, provided enough for a modest but pleasant retirement. I didn't have extravagant needs, just peace and security in my golden years. Jacob had always been a good son. Even through his rebellious teenage years, we maintained a close bond. Frank and I had scrimped and saved to put him through college, and he'd made us proud with his degree in finance from Washington State. He worked his way up at an investment firm in Portland, and at 39 he had a solid career as a financial advisor. Over the years, Jacob had a few serious relationships, but none had led to marriage. I worried sometimes he was too focused on his career, but I never pressured him. The right person will come along, I'd tell him, just as Frank always told me when I fretted about our son's happiness. When Jacob first mentioned Amanda, there was a new excitement in his voice I hadn't heard before. "Mom, she's different," he said over Sunday dinner. "She gets me in a way no one else ever has." A week later, he brought her home to meet me. Amanda Walker was striking with her auburn hair and confident smile. At 36, she carried herself with the assurance of someone who knew exactly what she wanted in life. She was attentive during that first dinner, asking thoughtful questions about Frank, admiring family photos, and complimenting the house extensively. "This craftsmanship is incredible," she said, running her hand along the fireplace mantel Frank had carved. "You don't see homes with this kind of character anymore. It must be worth a fortune in today's market." I should have noticed the calculation behind that comment, but I was too busy being grateful that Jacob seemed happy. Amanda told us she was a successful realtor who specialized in high-end properties, divorced once from a brief marriage in her 20s with no children. She'd moved to Portland from Seattle 3 years ago for a fresh start. Their romance progressed at whirlwind speed. Within 4 months, Jacob called me almost breathless with excitement. "Mom, I asked Amanda to marry me and she said yes." The engagement surprised me, but I wanted to be supportive. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. When do you think the wedding might be?" "Actually, that's the other news," Jacob replied. "We're thinking next month. Something small and intimate." Everything about the wedding planning felt rushed. Amanda took control immediately, politely but firmly sidelining my offers to help. When I suggested we use the lace tablecloths that had been at my own wedding, Amanda smiled tightly and said, "That's sweet, Hayley, but we're going for a more modern aesthetic." Whenever I visited their apartment to discuss details, Amanda steered conversations toward my house. "Have you ever thought of downsizing, Hayley? That big house must be so much work for you alone." During one visit, Amanda spotted the will paperwork I'd brought to show Jacob some updates my lawyer had suggested after Frank's death. She picked it up before I could stop her. "Oh, is this your will?" she asked, eyes scanning the document rapidly. "Smart to keep these things updated. Jacob and I were just talking about getting our affairs in order too, weren't we, honey?" Jacob nodded absently, and I gently took the papers back. an uncomfortable feeling settling in my stomach. That night as I drove home, I realized Amanda had never once asked about my late husband's life, only about his assets and the house he left behind. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with small moments that, when pieced together, painted a troubling picture. One afternoon, I stopped by their apartment unexpectedly with some wedding RSVPs that had been mistakenly sent to my address. Using the spare key Jacob had given me years ago, I let myself in, calling out as I entered. No one answered, so I placed the envelopes on the kitchen counter. As I turned to leave, I noticed my financial statements spread across the dining room table, alongside printouts of property values in my neighborhood. These were papers I kept in my home office desk drawer, not documents I'd ever brought to Jacob's apartment. I was still staring at them, confused, when Amanda emerged from the bathroom. She startled visibly upon seeing me. "Hayley, I didn't hear you come in," she said quickly, gathering the papers. "Those are my financial statements," I said quietly. Amanda's laugh sounded forced. "Oh yes, Jacob brought them over. He was helping me understand how to better manage money for retirement. I'm learning so much from him about financial planning." It was a plausible explanation, but Jacob hadn't mentioned anything about taking my documents. When I asked him later, he seemed confused, but then quickly agreed with Amanda's story. "Remember, Mom, you said I could look over your portfolio last month. I must have accidentally brought the papers home." I didn't remember saying any such thing, but I let it go, not wanting to create tension before the wedding. A week later, I was at their apartment for dinner when Amanda stepped onto the balcony to take a phone call. Through the partially open door, I overheard fragments that made my blood run cold. "The old lady has no clue. Just a few more weeks. The property alone is worth at least $400,000. Don't worry about Jacob, he'll do whatever I suggest." When she returned, Amanda was all smiles, but something had shifted for me. That night, I called my oldest friend Barbara for advice. "Something feels off about this relationship," I confessed. "Am I just being a possessive mother?" Barbara had known me since high school and never sugarcoated anything. "Hayley, if your gut is telling you something's wrong, listen to it. You're one of the least paranoid people I know." She suggested I start documenting my concerns and perhaps speak with a lawyer about protecting my assets just in case. Better safe than sorry, especially with how quickly this engagement happened. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and perfect June temperatures. Standing in the small chapel watching my only child exchange vows, I should have felt nothing but joy. Instead, I noticed how Amanda's smile seemed to disappear when she thought no one was watching, how her eyes kept darting to Jacob's best man, Ted, with what looked like irritation rather than affection. At the reception, Amanda was the picture of the devoted new daughter-in-law in public. She introduced me to everyone as my wonderful new mom and made sure photographers captured us embracing. But when others weren't looking, she barely acknowledged me, speaking only when necessary, and with a coldness that made me shiver despite the warm evening. Near the end of the night, I went to the restroom and overheard Amanda in an adjacent stall whispering to someone. "The wedding was worth every penny for appearances. Don't worry, the house will be mine in a month. The old woman won't know what hit her." I stood frozen, my worst fears confirmed. Amanda hadn't married my son out of love, but as part of some scheme to take my home. But why, and how deep was Jacob involved? That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my bedroom, torn between confronting Jacob immediately and taking time to gather more information. By morning, I'd decided on the latter course. If Amanda was planning something, I needed evidence before making accusations that might permanently damage my relationship with my son. The next day, I called my lawyer, Susan Martinez, who had handled Frank's estate. I explained my concerns carefully, not wanting to sound like a paranoid old woman. "Susan, I know this might sound crazy, but I think my new daughter-in-law married my son to get her hands on my property. Is there anything I can do to protect myself without alerting them?" Susan took me seriously. "Unfortunately, Hayley, I've seen similar situations before. Elder financial abuse is more common than most people realize, especially when property is involved." She advised me to secure all important documents, change passwords on accounts, and consider setting up cameras in common areas of my home. Also, start keeping a detailed journal of any suspicious behavior or conversations. Dates, times, exactly what was said. Documentation is crucial if this ever becomes a legal issue. I followed her advice, purchasing a small diary with a lock that I kept hidden inside an old purse in my closet. I also bought 2 small cameras disguised as clock radios, placing one in the living room and one in my home office. My suspicions continued to grow in the following days. Barbara introduced me to her nephew Scott, who worked in private investigation. Though retired now, he still had connections and agreed to run a background check on Amanda as a favor. Just to set your mind at ease, Barbara said, though we both knew we were hoping for the opposite, some concrete evidence that my instincts were correct. As I waited for Scott's findings, I began documenting everything, preparing for whatever might come next. The changes after Jacob and Amanda returned from their honeymoon were subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. Jacob, who used to call me almost daily now, rarely phoned unless Amanda was part of the conversation. Our Sunday dinners, a tradition since he moved into his own apartment, became less frequent and always included Amanda, who dominated discussions. 3 weeks after the wedding, during one of these dinners, Amanda casually mentioned a news story about elder care. "Did you see that piece about the new luxury retirement community opening near Lake Oswego?" she asked, serving salad. "They say it's like a 5-star resort with gourmet dining and spa services. Much better than those depressing nursing homes." Jacob nodded enthusiastically. "They have medical staff on site too, which gives such peace of mind." "I'm only 67, I reminded them, perplexed by this sudden interest in retirement homes. "And I'm in excellent health." Amanda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you are. But it's never too early to consider options. Many of these places have waiting lists." The conversation moved on, but the following week, I found brochures for 3 different assisted living facilities in Jacob's car when he gave me a ride to a doctor's appointment. When I asked about them, he seemed flustered. "Just research," he mumbled. "Amanda thought it would be good to know what's available, for the future." Around the same time, Amanda began making increasingly direct suggestions about my house. "Hayley, have you ever considered selling this place?" she asked during a visit, gesturing around my living room. "The market is hot right now, especially for character homes like this. We could help you get top dollar." "I have no interest in selling," I replied firmly. "This is my home." Of course," Amanda backpedaled smoothly. "But if you ever change your mind as a realtor, I could waive my commission if you sold to us. Jacob has always loved this house. Wouldn't it be wonderful to keep it in the family?" I smiled politely but said nothing. Later that night, I recorded the conversation in my journal, noting Amanda's persistent focus on the property rather than my well-being. 2 days later, Scott called with his findings on Amanda's background. What he discovered sent chills down my spine. "Mrs. Mason, your daughter-in-law isn't exactly who she claims to be," Scott explained. "Her real name is Amanda Winters. She's been married 3 times, not once. All 3 husbands were significantly older or financially well off. All 3 marriages ended within 2 years." He continued, revealing more troubling details. She was investigated twice for elder financial abuse, but charges were dropped both times when the victims refused to testify. Reading between the lines of the police reports, it seems they were too embarrassed or intimidated to proceed. Scott had also uncovered substantial debt in Amanda's name, including maxed-out credit cards, a tax lien, and a pending lawsuit from a former business partner. Based on what I'm seeing, he concluded she's desperate for money, and your mortgage-free house in a desirable neighborhood would solve a lot of her problems. I thanked Scott for his thoroughness, my mind racing with this new information. The question now was how much Jacob knew. Was my son complicit in this scheme or another victim? My answer came sooner than expected. The next evening, Jacob stopped by alone, something that had become rare since the wedding. He seemed nervous, pacing my living room instead of settling into his usual spot on the couch. "Mom, Amanda and I have been talking," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "We think it might be time for you to consider, alternative living arrangements." Alternative to what I asked, my heart pounding despite my calm exterior. "To this house. It's so big for just one person, and the stairs could become dangerous as you get older. Amanda knows this wonderful assisted living place. I studied my son's face, searching for the boy I raised. Jacob, do you really believe I need to move into a facility at my age and health? He looked uncomfortable. Well, no, not immediately. But it's good to plan ahead, right? Is this about the house? I asked directly. Does Amanda want it? No, I mean, we've talked about possibly buying it from you someday, but that's not why. His voice trailed off at my skeptical expression. Jacob, has Amanda told you about her previous marriages or her financial problems? His face showed genuine shock. What are you talking about? She was only married once before to her college boyfriend. Gently, I shared what Scott had discovered. Jacob refused to believe it, initially growing defensive and accusing me of trying to sabotage his marriage out of jealousy. He left angry, telling me I was wrong about Amanda. The next day, he called to apologize for his outburst, but still defended Amanda. There must be some mistake in the records Scott found. Amanda explained everything. Those other marriages were brief and annulled, which is why she doesn't count them. And the debt was from her ex-business partner embezzling funds. I didn't argue, recognizing Amanda's manipulation at work. Instead, I continued gathering evidence discreetly. Over the next few weeks, Amanda's mask slipped further. She began isolating me from friends, telling them I wasn't feeling well when they called to make plans. She intercepted mail, particularly financial statements, claiming she was helping organize my affairs. Through my hidden cameras, I discovered her searching my home office when I was supposedly napping. She copied documents, photographed financial papers, and once spent 20 minutes on my computer, likely looking for passwords or account information. Most disturbingly, I found Jacob signing papers Amanda placed before him with barely a glance at their contents. When I retrieved one such document from the recycling bin after they left, I discovered it was a power of attorney form, thankfully incomplete, without my signature and notarization. The situation was escalating faster than I anticipated. Amanda was making bolder moves, no longer bothering to fully hide her intentions. I called Susan for urgent legal advice and shared my concerns with Detective Williams, a family friend at the Portland Police Department. I don't want to get my son in trouble, I explained to Detective Williams, but I'm afraid I'm being targeted for elder fraud. He took my concerns seriously, reviewing the evidence I'd collected and advising me on next steps. Keep documenting everything, he instructed. And if they make any direct attempt to take your property or finances, call me immediately. I knew the confrontation was coming. I just didn't expect how soon or how brazen it would be. The day everything came to a head was deceptively beautiful, one of those perfect October mornings when the Pacific Northwest shows its true glory. Sunlight filtered through trees, just beginning to turn amber and crimson, and the air held that crisp clarity that comes with early fall. I was in my garden deadheading the last of the summer roses when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. I straightened up slowly, my knees protesting after an hour of gardening, and saw Amanda's sleek silver BMW parked behind Jacob's more modest Honda. From the BMW emerged a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged and carrying a briefcase, followed by Amanda in what I recognized as her professional realtor outfit, a tailored navy suit with heels that clicked purposefully up my walkway. Jacob exited his car last, moving more hesitantly, his face pale and drawn in a way that immediately concerned me. Something was wrong with my son beyond whatever scheme Amanda had orchestrated. I removed my gardening gloves and walked to meet them at the front door, my heart hammering despite my outward calm. "This is a surprise," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I wasn't expecting company today." Amanda's smile was razor-sharp confidence, bordering on smugness. "Hayley, this is Mr. Peterson. He's a notary public and will be helping us with some paperwork today." I nodded politely to the man but addressed my son. "Jacob, what's going on?" Before he could answer, Amanda placed her hand on his arm in what appeared to be a supportive gesture, but which I recognized as controlling. "Why don't we go inside? This is a conversation better had sitting down." In my living room, the room where Jacob had taken his first steps, where Frank and I had spent countless evenings reading together, Amanda wasted no time getting to the point. She placed a folder of documents on the coffee table, while Mr. Peterson set up what looked like an official stamp and ink pad. Hayley Amanda began her tone condescendingly, gentle as one might use with a child or someone very elderly. Jacob and I have been concerned about you living alone in this big house. After careful consideration, we've made arrangements that will benefit everyone. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, saying nothing. My silence seemed to unnerve her slightly, but she continued. We've just sold this house, she announced triumphantly. The buyers are eager to take possession by the end of the month, which gives you plenty of time to pack essentials. We found a wonderful room for you at Sunshine Meadows Assisted Living. They have an excellent memory care unit if you need it later. Jacob looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. His hands trembled slightly, and I noticed a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool temperature. And how exactly have you sold my house? I asked calmly. Given that it's in my name and I haven't signed any listing agreement or sales contract. Amanda's smile tightened fractionally. That's why we're here today. The paperwork just needs your signature, which Mr. Peterson will notarize. She slid a document toward me. It's all very standard. Jacob has power of attorney anyway, so this is really just a formality. Does he? I asked, still calm. I don't recall signing any power of attorney. Amanda's composure slipped for just a moment. Well, not officially yet, but that's also in this packet. We're taking care of everything at once to simplify the process for you. I turned to Jacob, ignoring Amanda completely. Son, is this what you want? To put your mother in a nursing home and take her house? Jacob finally looked up, his eyes, red-rimmed and miserable. Mom, it's not like that. It's for your own good, Amanda says. Amanda says, I repeated softly. Jacob, when did you start letting someone else think for you? Amanda's facade cracked, further irritation flashing across her face. Enough of this emotional manipulation, Hayley. The decision has been made. Jacob and I are trying to help you. I looked at her directly. Are you? Or are you trying to help yourself to my property because you're drowning in debt from your previous failed marriages and business ventures? The room went silent. Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable, glancing between us with growing unease. Amanda's face flushed red, then drained of color. I don't know what you think you know, she said, voice dropping to a dangerous pitch, but you're clearly confused. This is exactly why you need supervised care. She turned to Jacob. Your mother is becoming paranoid. Dr. Richards mentioned this might happen. This was a new lie, as I had never seen any Dr. Richards, and from Jacob's confused expression, neither had he. Amanda pressed on, abandoning pretense, her voice hardening. Sign the papers, Hayley. You have no choice. No one will believe the ramblings of a woman your age over a respected realtor and financial advisor. Jacob seemed to wake from a daze. Amanda, this isn't what we discussed. You said Mom agreed to this plan yesterday. Amanda rounded on him. Be quiet, Jacob. This is happening whether she cooperates or not. She turned back to me, mask completely dropped now. I never loved your precious son, you know. He was just my ticket to this property. Do you have any idea what this lot alone is worth in today's market? The developers I've already spoken with are prepared to tear this dump down and build 3 luxury townhomes. Jacob looked stricken, hearing for the first time the truth about his marriage. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was sorrow for my son's pain. Amanda wasn't finished. Sign now or I'll make sure you're declared incompetent. One call to Adult Protective Services about your dangerous behavior and memory issues will start the process. I have friends in the system who can expedite things. I stood up slowly, smoothing my gardening pants. You want me to pack my things and leave my home. Is that right? Amanda looked triumphant, believing she'd won. Exactly. Just the essentials. The rest will be handled by the estate sale company I've already contacted. I nodded thoughtfully. Perfect. Let's stop at the police station first. They're very interested in what I sent them about you. The shocked silence that followed my statement was broken by the sound of Amanda's pen clattering to the floor. Mr. Peterson, the notary, began hastily packing his stamp and papers. I should go, he muttered. This appears to be a family matter that needs resolution before any notarization can take place. Amanda recovered quickly, her realtor's smile snapping back into place. Hayley is just confused. There's no need for police involvement in a simple property transfer. I walked calmly to the bookshelf, where a hollow book safe held my most important documents. From it, I withdrew a thick manila envelope and a small digital recorder. For the past 4 months, ever since you began showing unusual interest in my house and financial affairs, I've been documenting everything, Amanda. I explained, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I turned to Jacob, whose expression wavered between confusion and dawning realization. Son, I tried to tell you something wasn't right, but I knew you wouldn't believe me without proof. Returning my attention to Amanda, whose face had gone rigid, I continued. It started with small things. You asking too many questions about the property value. Going through my financial papers when you thought I wasn't looking. Making jokes about nursing homes within weeks of meeting me. I held up the digital recorder. But then came the phone calls I overheard, like the one where you told someone the old lady has no clue and the property alone is worth at least $400,000. Jacob's face crumbled as he turned to Amanda. You said that about my mother? Amanda's eyes darted between us, calculating her next move. Jacob, she's clearly been recording private conversations without consent, which is illegal in Oregon. This proves she's paranoid and vindictive. Actually, I interjected. One-party consent is legal for recordings in Oregon, as Detective Williams confirmed when I consulted him. I opened the manila envelope and removed a stack of papers. These are copies of everything I've sent to the police over the last 3 months. Bank statements showing how you tried to access my accounts. Screenshots of you searching my computer while I was supposedly napping, captured by the security cameras I installed. Transcripts of your phone conversations in my home discussing your plans to take my house. I handed a document to Jacob. And this is the background check that shows Amanda's real history. 3 previous marriages to wealthy older men, all ending within 2 years. 2 prior investigations for elder fraud that were dropped when the victims refused to testify. Jacob took the paper with trembling hands, scanning it as the color drained from his face. Don't believe her lies, Amanda snapped, but her confidence was visibly cracking. That report is fabricated. The Portland police didn't think so, I replied, especially when they matched it with similar reports from Seattle and Tacoma. You've established quite a pattern, Amanda Winters. Or is it Amanda Locke or Amanda Delaney? You've used so many names, it's hard to keep track. I withdrew my phone from my pocket. Should I call Detective Williams now, or would you like to leave peacefully and wait for them to contact you? Amanda's composure finally shattered completely. You stupid old woman. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I have friends in this town, connections you couldn't imagine. Her voice had risen to a shriek, causing Mr. Peterson to edge toward the door. I should definitely go. This is highly irregular. As he left, Amanda made one last desperate attempt. Jacob, are you going to let your mother talk to your wife this way after everything I've done for you? Jacob stood up slowly, looking at Amanda as if seeing her for the first time. What exactly have you done for me, Amanda Lead, about your past? Tried to steal my mother's home. Made me believe she needed to be in a nursing home when she's perfectly capable of living independently. Amanda's strategy shifted instantly, tears filling her eyes. Baby, you don't understand. My past is complicated, yes, but everything I did was for us, for our future. Your mother is twisting things. Stop, Jacob, said quietly but firmly. Just stop. I heard you say you never loved me, that I was just your ticket to this property. Amanda's face hardened again, recognizing the game was up. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me, both of you. If you leave now, it will be considered fleeing, I warned. I've already texted Detective Williams. He's on his way with officers to take your statement. As if on cue, police sirens became audible in the distance. Amanda froze, hand on the doorknob, panic flashing across her face. She made a sudden dash for her car. She didn't make it far. 2 police cruisers pulled into the driveway just as she reached her BMW. Detective Williams emerged from one, accompanied by a uniformed officer. From the other car stepped two more officers. I watched from the porch as they intercepted Amanda Detective Williams, calmly explaining that they needed to ask her some questions regarding allegations of attempted elder fraud and falsification of legal documents. Jacob stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders, as Amanda was escorted to the police car, not under arrest yet, but clearly not free to leave. Her furious glare in our direction spoke volumes about her thwarted plans. Detective Williams approached us after ensuring Amanda was secured. "Mrs. Mason will need statements from both you and your son. The evidence you've provided gives us plenty to investigate, but your testimony will be crucial." I nodded, relief washing over me now that the immediate danger had passed. "We're ready whenever you need us." As we went back inside to wait for the officers to finish preliminary work with Amanda, Jacob broke down, apologizing profusely. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have seen through her. How could I have been so blind?" I held my son as he hadn't allowed me to do since he was a teenager. "Love makes us vulnerable, Jacob. She was very skilled at manipulation, and she targeted you specifically because of your kind heart." We spent the next several hours giving detailed statements to the police. I provided all my documentation, from the journal entries to the security camera footage to the recorded conversations. Jacob, still reeling from the revelations about his new wife, contributed what he knew, including admitting to signing documents without reading them carefully. She always had a logical explanation for everything he explained to Detective Williams. She'd catch me when I was tired after work, or rushing between appointments, and make it seem like it was just routine paperwork that needed quick signatures. By evening, Amanda had been formally charged with attempted elder fraud, with additional charges likely to follow as the investigation continued. She was being held pending arraignment, having been deemed a flight risk due to her history of using multiple identities. As the police finally left our home, Jacob and I sat exhausted in the kitchen, the events of the day settling around us like heavy dust. "What happens now?" Jacob asked quietly, staring into the mug of tea I'd made him. "Now we begin to heal," I said simply. "Both of us." The days following Amanda's arrest were a blur of legal consultations, police interviews, and emotional conversations. Jacob moved temporarily into his old bedroom, unable to face returning to the apartment he had shared with Amanda. His embarrassment and shame were palpable, but beneath those emotions I sensed relief. The fog of manipulation was lifting, allowing him to see clearly for the first time in months. 3 days after the confrontation, Jacob sat at our kitchen table, legal papers spread before him. "The lawyer says I have grounds for annulment rather than divorce," he explained, his voice hollow. "Based on fraud and misrepresentation, the marriage was less than 6 months, and she clearly entered into it with deceptive intent." I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "That sounds like the cleanest break possible under the circumstances." Jacob nodded, signing the forms with a steadiness that surprised me. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't been so observant, so prepared. She would have taken everything from you, and I would have helped her do it." "But that's not what happened," I reminded him gently. "We caught her in time." Word of what had happened spread quickly through our close-knit community. Neighbors I'd known for decades stopped by with casseroles, and concern, many expressing outrage on my behalf. My church friends organized a rotating schedule of visitors, less for practical help than to ensure I wasn't dwelling alone on the traumatic events. My friend Barbara was particularly supportive, having been suspicious of Amanda from the beginning. "I always thought she had shark eyes," Barbara declared over coffee in my kitchen. "Dead and calculating. I just couldn't say that to you when Jacob seemed so smitten." The legal proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. At the bail hearing a week after her arrest, Amanda appeared subdued in her orange jumpsuit, nothing like the polished, confident woman who had tried to steal my home. The judge set bail at $50,000, citing her history of using multiple identities and the risk of flight. To everyone's surprise, no one came forward to post bail. Amanda's supposed network of influential friends appeared non-existent. She remained in custody awaiting trial while the prosecutor's office built their case against her. That case grew stronger each week as Detective Williams and his team uncovered more about Amanda's past. Two previous victims, elderly men from Seattle and Tacoma, came forward after hearing about her arrest. Both described similar schemes where Amanda had gained their trust, isolated them from family, and attempted to take control of their assets. She targeted widowers, primarily Detective Williams explained during one of our meetings. Men who were vulnerable and often lonely. You were her first attempt at going through a family member to get at a property, which suggests she's been escalating her methods. The district attorney assigned to the case, Lydia Porter, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a special interest in elder abuse cases. She met with me to prepare for possibly testifying against Amanda. "Your documentation is extraordinary, Mrs. Mason," she commended me. "Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late, and even then they often lack concrete evidence." "I was lucky to have my suspicions early," I admitted. "And to have friends who took those suspicions seriously." Miss Porter nodded thoughtfully. "We're seeing an epidemic of elder fraud cases, unfortunately. The perpetrators count on shame, keeping victims silent. They know many older people would rather lose money than admit they've been swindled, especially when it involves family." Jacob struggled with his own legal and emotional challenges during this time. Beyond the annulment proceedings, he faced questions at work about his judgment given his role as a financial advisor. His firm placed him on temporary administrative leave while they conducted an internal review. "It's fair," he told me one evening, though the strain showed on his face. "How can I advise clients on protecting their assets when I nearly helped someone steal my own mother's home?" I worried about him, constantly noticing how he'd lost weight and developed dark circles under his eyes. After particularly difficult days, I would find him sitting in the backyard after midnight staring at nothing. To address these concerns, I suggested we both begin therapy, something I'd never considered before. "We've been through a trauma, Jacob. There's no shame in getting help to process it." Surprisingly, he agreed immediately, perhaps recognizing his need for professional guidance to navigate his guilt and betrayal. We found a therapist specializing in family issues related to financial abuse, Dr. Eleanor Jenkins, who offered both individual and joint sessions. In my private sessions with Dr. Jenkins, I worked through complicated feelings about my son. "I don't blame Jacob," I insisted during one appointment. "Amanda was clearly a practiced manipulator. You can understand why it happened, and still acknowledge the hurt," Dr. Jenkins suggested gently. "It's not about blame, but about honest recognition of the breach of trust." Those conversations helped me recognize that while I had forgiven Jacob, rebuilding complete trust would take time. It wasn't just that he had believed Amanda over me, but that he had been willing to force me from my home based on her word alone. Meanwhile, my advocacy work began almost accidentally. During a senior center lunch I attended regularly, the director asked if I would share my experience as a cautionary tale for other elderly community members. Initially reluctant, I finally agreed to speak to a small group. The response was overwhelming, with several attendees approaching afterward to share similar experiences or concerns about relatives' behaviors. Word spread, and soon I was invited to other community centers and retirement homes to speak about recognizing the warning signs of elder fraud. I created a simple handout with red flags to watch for, resources to contact, and steps to protect oneself based on my own experience and information from Detective Williams and Miss Porter. At each talk, I emphasized one key message: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. 3 months after Amanda's arrest, the prosecutor offered a plea deal, which she accepted after initial resistance. She would plead guilty to attempted elder fraud and falsifying legal documents, in exchange for dropping additional charges that had accumulated as more victims came forward. The day she entered her plea, Jacob and I sat in the courtroom watching as the woman who had nearly destroyed our family stood before the judge. She looked smaller somehow, her confident posture diminished, though her eyes still held calculation rather than remorse. Her sentence was substantial: 5 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, plus restitution to her victims. As the bailiff led her away, she turned once to look at Jacob, her expression unreadable. He held her gaze steadily until she disappeared through the courtroom door. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters asked for statements. I declined to speak on camera, but Jacob surprised me by stepping forward. "My mother is the hero of this story," he told them, his voice clear and firm. "She protected herself when I failed to. I hope others learn from her example about the importance of trusting their instincts and documenting concerns, especially when it comes to protecting our elderly loved ones from predators like Amanda Walker." As we drove home afterward, I reached over to squeeze his hand. "I'm proud of you, Jacob. That couldn't have been easy." He managed a small smile. "It's the least I can do. The beginning of making amends." That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jacob broached a topic we'd both been avoiding. "I've been thinking about finding my own place again. Not right away, but soon. We both need to establish new boundaries, I think." I nodded, feeling both sadness and relief. "I think that's wise. But know that this will always be your home too, whenever you need it." In the growing twilight surrounded by the garden Frank and I had planted decades ago, I felt a peace I hadn't expected to find so soon after such betrayal. The house remained mine, my son was finding his way back to himself. And perhaps most importantly, I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. 6 months after Amanda entered the correctional system to begin serving her sentence, life had found a new rhythm. The intense media interest in the case had finally died down, allowing both Jacob and me to move forward without constant reminders of our ordeal. Amanda's conviction had brought unexpected closure for others as well. 4 additional victims had come forward after her arrest, sharing similar stories of manipulation and attempted fraud. 2 of these cases had been beyond the statute of limitations for charges, but their testimonies had strengthened the case against her and helped establish her pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals. The judge had ordered restitution to all identified victims, though the likelihood of Amanda having assets to fulfill this obligation seemed slim. More valuable than any potential financial compensation was the validation these other victims received, the acknowledgement that what had happened to them was not their fault and that they were not alone. Jacob had moved into a modest apartment about 20 minutes from my home. The distance was important symbolically, giving us both space to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. He had returned to work after his firm completed their investigation, though he'd been reassigned from financial advising to compliance, a change he actually embraced. "It feels right," he told me during one of our now weekly dinners. "Helping make sure other financial advisors are following proper protocols protecting clients from exploitation. I'm learning so much about the vulnerabilities in the system." The annulment of his marriage to Amanda had been finalized 3 months after her arrest. Jacob had opted not to date since then, focusing instead on rebuilding his life and processing what he called his catastrophic lapse in judgment. My home was now legally protected through an irrevocable trust Susan had helped establish. The arrangement ensured I could live there for the rest of my life, after which it would transfer to Jacob or any heirs he might have, with provisions for a portion of the value to go to elder abuse prevention programs. "It's like wearing a seatbelt," Susan had explained. "You hope you'll never need it again, but it's prudent to have the protection in place." My advocacy work had expanded beyond occasional talks at senior centers. I'd been invited to participate in a state task force on elder fraud prevention, sharing my experience alongside law enforcement, social workers, and financial industry representatives. Together, we were developing recommendations for stronger legal protections and more resources for vulnerable seniors. The support group I joined for victims of financial exploitation had become an important part of my life. Meeting monthly at the community center, we shared stories, strategies, and the complicated emotions that came with being targeted by someone we had trusted. Many members were ashamed, initially believing they should have been smarter or seen the warning signs earlier. The responsibility lies with the perpetrator, not the victim. I often reminded them words Dr. Jenkins had repeatedly told me. These individuals are skilled manipulators who have refined their techniques over many victims. Through this work, I'd formed new friendships that helped fill the void left by the trauma. Martha, a 73-year-old retired librarian who had been defrauded by her nephew, became a particularly close friend. We often met for coffee between support group meetings, comparing notes on our grandchildren and the latest detective novels we'd read. One crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after the confrontation with Amanda Jacob, arrived for our planned hike in Forest Park, a tradition we'd recently established. As we walked the leaf-strewn trails, conversations flowed more easily between us than they had in months. "I met with Dr. Jenkins yesterday," he mentioned, as we paused at a viewpoint overlooking the city. "She thinks I'm ready to start forgiving myself." I studied my son's profile, noting how the haunted look had finally left his eyes. "What do you think?" He considered the question seriously. "I think forgiveness is a process, not an event. But I'm beginning to understand that continuing to punish myself doesn't help anyone, least of all you." "That's wise," I agreed, taking his arm as we continued along the path. "I'm thinking of starting a financial literacy program," Jacob added after a few minutes. "For high schools and community colleges, teaching young people how to protect themselves and their families from financial predators." Pride swelled in my chest. "I think that's a wonderful idea." "Would you consider helping?" he asked hesitantly. "Your perspective would be invaluable." "I'd be honored," I replied, touched by the invitation to collaborate. As we completed our circuit and returned to the parking area, Jacob surprised me with a question. "Do you ever hear from Amanda?" I shook my head. "No. Detective Williams keeps me updated on her case, but there's been no direct contact. Her appeal was denied last month, so she'll serve her full sentence." Jacob nodded, relief visible in his expression. "Good. I still wake up sometimes thinking about what could have happened if you hadn't been so proactive." "I've learned not to dwell on what-ifs," I told him. "They're rarely productive." Back at home that evening, I sat in my garden as twilight settled over the neighborhood. Frank had designed this space with benches positioned to catch both morning sun and evening shade. Sitting there always brought a sense of his continued presence, comforting rather than painful after all these years. The ordeal with Amanda had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I'd become more cautious in some respects, more vigilant about protecting my boundaries. Yet, paradoxically, I'd also grown more open to new experiences and relationships, recognizing that isolation only increased vulnerability. Most significantly, I'd learned to trust my instincts again. For too long, I'd doubted my perceptions when they conflicted with what others told me, particularly younger people who spoke with authority. That deference to others' judgments had nearly cost me everything. The next day, I received a call from Martha, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Hayley, the Community Foundation approved our grant proposal. We're getting funding for the Elder Fraud Awareness Campaign." The project had been months in the making, a series of workshops and materials we'd designed based on our experiences and professional input. With this funding, we could reach seniors throughout the county with potentially life-saving information. "That's wonderful news," I told her sincerely. "When do we start?" "They want to meet next week to finalize the timeline," Martha replied. "Can you make Tuesday at 2? "I'll be there," I promised, already making notes about points to include in our presentation. That evening, as Jacob arrived for dinner, I shared the news about the grant. His genuine enthusiasm reflected how far we'd come in rebuilding our relationship. Over his favorite lasagna, we discussed the upcoming holidays, our first since the Amanda ordeal. "I was thinking we might host Thanksgiving here," I suggested. "Invite Barbara and her family. Maybe some of your colleagues, who don't have local family." Jacob looked surprised but pleased. "You're ready for that, hosting a big gathering?" I nodded confidently. "More than ready. This house needs to be filled with new happy memories." Later, after Jacob had left and I was preparing for bed, I paused by the family photos arranged on my bedroom wall. Frank's smile beamed from many of them alongside images of Jacob growing up and more recent pictures with friends. I touched a photograph of Frank holding infant Jacob, both of them laughing at something beyond the camera. "We did good with him," I whispered. "He lost his way for a while, but he found his path back." I'd come to believe that the true measure of resilience wasn't avoiding hardship, but finding your way through it with your core values intact. The experience with Amanda had tested both Jacob and me, revealing weaknesses we needed to address, but also strengths we hadn't fully recognized. My final thought before sleep was not about Amanda or the trauma she'd caused, but about the community I'd found and the purpose that had emerged from the ordeal. In trying to take everything from me, she had inadvertently led me to discover parts of myself I might never have known otherwise. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take advantage of you or a loved one? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that sharing our experiences helps others recognize warning signs and know they're not alone. Please like this video if you found my story helpful, subscribe for more real-life lessons, and share with anyone who might benefit from learning about protecting themselves or their elderly loved ones. Thank you for listening, and remember, trust your instincts and document everything. That simple advice might save you from heartache down the road.